the angel of Jehovah, today looking at an encounter between Malach Yahweh and Jacob. So let's get on with it. It occurs in Genesis 31, by the way, when Jacob was nearing the end of his time, where he was fulfilling some obligations to his father in law Laban. He had an encounter with the angel of Jehovah, called the angel of God in this particular episode. Same person. The encounter was in the form of a dream. What kind of a dream? Well, let's look at Genesis 31 and we'll see, beginning in verse 11, reading verses 11, 12, and 13. Jacob speaking here. Then the angel of God, that's Malach Yahweh, said to me in the dream, Jacob? And I said, Here I am. So notice this is exactly the interchange between God and Abraham that we saw in our last session. Verse 12, and he, that's the angel of Yahweh, said, Lift up now your eyes and see that all the male goats which are mating are striped, speckled, and mottled. But I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. You remember that Laban was keep switching the terms of his employment for his second daughter. I believe it was his second daughter, Rachel. He had already picked up Leah, unbeknownst to him, but he found out pretty quickly. Uh, and so the angel of Jehovah now steps in and see, I'm doing this now. He didn't really say that. He says, I've seen all that Laban's been doing you, but he just said, this is what's going on with the goats, the male goats, striped, speckled, and mottled, which was precisely the goats that Jacob was supposed to be getting as he mated goats for Laban. And in verse 13, I am the God of Bethel. And this was a place where God had met Jacob earlier on his way to Laban. Now he's getting ready to leave and go back to Canaan, where he left from. I am the God of Bethel. And notice who's speaking? Malach Yahweh. He says, I am the God of Bethel. Where you anointed a pillar, where you made a vow to me. This sounds like he's saying, I'm the God who dealt with you way back in Bethel. And he continues, now arise, leave this land, and return to the land of your birth. So he said, get out of here. You're not going to go anywhere with Laban. So Malach Yahweh made a startling claim in verse 13, as we remarked. He said, I am the God of Bethel. Bethel is where, again, Jacob met God on the way to Laban's. The encounter mentioned in Genesis 28, that's where the Bethel thing occurred, was where Jacob had his dream of the so-called Jacob's ladder. And it was where God said some things to Jacob. Genesis 28, starting in verse 13. Well, we'll just limit it to verse 13 for now. And behold, Yahweh stood above the ladder, that's in Jacob's dream, and said, I am Yahweh, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. Uh, the land on which you lie, I will give it to you and to your descendants. So notice that means that the later statement of Malach Yahweh was a claim to being the God Yahweh who is here interacting with Jacob. And so they get on with it. And they said that the statement uh, made the angel's declaration very startling. The angel was apparently claiming to be Yahweh. Not the first time we've seen that claim, or at least our understanding of that claim. In this last passage, there was no direct reference to the angel of Jehovah, nor is any individual identified as the angel of God in this particular meeting here at Bethel. But Jehovah was present in the dream in some form that Jacob understood. And of course, Malach Yahweh later claims to have been that particular form. Beginning in verse 18 of chapter 28, we find the anointing and vow referred to by the Malach Yahweh in chapter 31 when he claimed to be this God. Genesis 28, verses 18, 19, 20, and 21. So Jacob rose early in the morning and took the stone that he had put under his head. That's a hard pillow, right? And set it up as a pillar and poured oil on its top. That's the anointing that the angel referred to. And he called the name of that place Bethel, which means, of course, house of El, house of God. However, previously the name of the city had been Luz. In some places in the Genesis, you'll see Luz referred to. Verse 20, then Jacob made a vow, and this is the one Malach Yahweh was talking about also. If God will be with me, look at all the conditions. If you'll be with me and will keep me on the journeys that I take, and will give me food to eat and garments to wear, and if I return to my father's house in safety, then Yahweh will be my God. So Jacob's trying to bargain with Yahweh the conditions under which Yahweh will be his God. And remember in 31:13, Malach Yahweh claimed to be the God of this encounter. Did Jacob forget that encounter? Not through his long entire life. At the end of Jacob's life, he wanted to bless his family, beginning with Joseph and his children. In doing so, he gave a three-part invocation of Jehovah. Look clearly at the third part as we found in Genesis 48 of, well, we found it in Genesis 48. I'm going to read verses 15 and 16. And he, that's Jacob, blessed Joseph and said, the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life to this day. Now, catch this in verse 16. The angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads, and may my name live on in them, and the nation of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and may they grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. So know the sequence there. The God of Abraham, God, Jacob's shepherd, the angel who redeemed Jacob. No, Jacob never forgot Malach Yahweh, the angel of Jehovah. Rather, I think he believed the angel of God to be Yahweh. In putting the angel in the same context as Yahweh twice, Yahweh was placed third time angel. That means that the angel was in Jacob's mind on the same level as Yahweh. My interpretation, he knew the angel was Yahweh. But let's back up a bit. On the way back to Canaan from his servitude under Laban, and that was many years, remember, what, 15 years or something? Jacob had an unusual encounter with someone, a man or an angel or God. What was that encounter? It was a wrestling match. One night during the trip, Jacob was alone in camp. He had separated himself from the rest of his flock, his servants, and his family. He separated himself, and he wrestled with someone until daybreak. The story is found in Genesis 32. The question was, who was Jacob's opponent? Moses wrote in verse 24 that the opponent was a man. That opponent, however, claimed in verse 28 of chapter 32 that Jacob had wrestled with God. And Jacob himself claimed in verse 30 of chapter 32 that he had seen God face to face in the encounter. Additionally, Hosea 12:3 and 4 at the beginning of the says that Jacob struggled with God and with the angel. So Hosea says he wrestled with both. So was it a man? Was it God? Or was it Malach Yahweh? If it was God, then Jacob saw God face to face and lived. That wouldn't be the case. So what he saw, whom he wrestled with, I'm convinced was Malach Yahweh. Well, uh, it would seem that Jacob actually had an encounter there at the place that he called Peniel, also Peniel. Some call it Penuel. This was years after the Bethel encounter. The episode occurred as Jacob took his family and livestock back to. Let me read Genesis 32, verses 26 through 30. Then he, that was the other guy Jacob was wrestling with, said, let me go, for the dawn is breaking. But Jacob said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. Evidently, Jacob must have been a pretty healthy guy. So he, that is the other guy, said to him, what's your name? And Jacob said, Jacob. Now again, notice that that was a cultural way of gaining some kind of advantage over a person, was to know his name, particularly if he did not know yours. And the other man said, your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God. So the other guy says, I'm God, and with men and have prevailed. Now that's rather interesting because also in that culture, if you rename someone and they were bound to it, that essentially said, I own you. You're mine. You're under my power. You're under my influence. For example, King Necho of Egypt renamed one of Israel's kings and said, now you are my vassal. I own you. So here that man that Jacob wrestled with has just done that to him. So Jacob, then, this is verse 29, Jacob asked him and said, please tell me your name. But the other guy, the other guy said, Why is it you ask my name? You think I could give you my name? No way. And, but he blessed Jacob there. So Jacob got his blessing. He got his name changed by someone who to whom he now belonged, and he did not get even and get this person's name. So, verse 30, Jacob named the place Peniel, for he said, I have seen God face to face. He believed the one who changed his name, the one with whom he wrestled, the one whose name he could not get. He understood that to be God. Yet my life has been preserved. He was under the impression if he came face to face with God, he was done. But he understood that. He understood that man to be God. So no wonder Jacob remembered the angel all the way through to the end of his life. So what have we seen? Well, Malach Yahweh claimed to be Yahweh to Jacob. Moses indicated the same thing. Jacob did the same, although not really saying it directly. He didn't really say directly that Malach Yahweh was Yahweh, but the sequence of events tells you he understood that. Jacob did acknowledge an angel at the end of his life, perhaps equating the angel as Yahweh. We'll see some of that. Well, we saw that a bit a minute ago. Malach Yahweh came to Jacob in a dream, wrestled with Jacob, at least that's my opinion, and renamed Jacob Israel. And what are we going to do next? Well, Moses is who we're going to look at. We're going to look at the narrative of Moses' interactions with Malach